Hello everyone, my name is Eric and welcome back to this history of Mutant, from the start leading up to Mutant Year Zero and Mutant Year Zero: The Road to Eden. This is the third part where we have reached what is called as the third edition of Mutant, called Mutant RYMD. Mutant RYMD is important, or Mutant SPACE if we're going to be picky, because this branches off Mutant into two directions. One that becomes Mutant Chronicles, and one that continues over much later into Mutant The Heirs of Doom, when it gets a reboot. So I'm not going to talk about Mutant Chronicles in the future. I might do a different episode just talking about it. I've already talked about it in my Doom Trooper playthrough. So you can currently you can refer to that. Whenever it shows up, the other ones, I might add a link here. But today we're going to talk about Mutant RYMD. So, once again, we are on the third edition of Mutant. The first edition was the Mutant 1 and 2 were based on Gamma World. Mutant 2089, or New Mutant, was based on Judge Dredd and Shadowrun and so forth. But the third one takes a further step, going into space. Some consider Mutant RYMD to be an expansion module to Mutant 2089. Others consider it its own game. I consider it its own game due to the fact that it was only around for about 1 year. This game came out in 1992, and the year after that, Mutant Chronicles came out. And I believe that people who have knowledge about Mutant Chronicles will see why I consider this its own game. It's a link, it's the missing link between the two versions of Mutant. So, to put it like this, you have, once again, you can play different races. You have the humans, you have the psionically gifted human, and you have the mutated human. Not much mention about this other than that. There's a little bit of a description of each of them, and that's it. There are some classes you can have, which is basically the Acolyte, who is part of the darkness, the evilness. It's actually just called the Great Evil. You can be a corporate worker, you can be a scientist, an religious inquisitor, and that goes over into Mutant Chronicles, the Inquisitor. You have the Interpol, which is from the older Mutant, which is an inter-corporate police officer, basically. You have the Agents of Chaos, also working for probably one of the cults from the evil. You can be a criminal, you can be a reporter, journalist, media worker, a pilot, something they just decided to call a rogue, which is basically a freelance space pilot. A Ronin, which is also available in Mutant Chronicles for the Mishima Corporation. You can play a SWAT, or a regular trooper. Well, just a soldier. Or a Doom Trooper. And here's something very important. Doom Troopers, as we know, are very important to the plot of Mutant Chronicles. There's also several more factions here than... there are some factions that you'll recognize in the Mutant Chronicles setting, and I'm going to get to that. So those were the options that you had. Like, you have the three races and these classes. There's both cybernetics, robotics, and magic available in this setting. Well, psionics, basically. But the evil can use psionics and magic. And necrological technology, or necrotech. But it's not available to regular humans who are on the good side, so to speak. Now, moving on to the setting. The setting is very interesting in the respect that, as I said, it's very close to Mutant Chronicles. So I see it as a natural step away from this is Mutant Chronicles. And as I said, this was made in 92. Chronicles came out in 93. So this just has the main box of the game and one adventure module, which was also kind of aimed towards Mutant Chronicles. When you open it, it says even on the front, an adventure module for Mutant Chronicles. Even though inside it says this is an adventure module for Mutant SPACE. Now, let's move on to the setting. I'm going to talk a little bit about Operation Kirkwood a bit later here. So, it's the year 2192. As you've noticed, they like to jump forward by 100 years, 200 years, like even hundreds from the year of the release. The world, like the Earth, is still round. It's just heavily polluted as fuck. But humanity has spread out into the solar system. Back then, this is the 90s, which meant that there were 9 planets and the rumored Planet X. So they counted 10 planets all in all. Pluto, well, I'll get to Pluto. Let's start from the beginning. We have Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, let's see now, Jupiter, and I never remember the order of the ones after that. Neptune, Saturn. Oh fuck, this is getting embarrassing. Uranus. Yeah, I'm not saying Uranus, it's actually Uranus. Then Pluto, and the 10th planet, which was Planet X, the big conspiracy of the 90s, is called Nero. After the mad Roman Emperor Nero. It even has a moon called Caligula. Or is that Pluto? I can't remember. But I know that Pluto today is a dwarf planet, and there are a lot of bodies in the Kuiper Belt area that could actually be defined as dwarf planets or even planets because of their size, as far as I remember. It's neither here nor there in this discussion, because this is the world within this setting. The world setting is controlled by the mega corporations, which was also around in the older version, in the previous edition. Now they are more defined and they have specific names, and you will recognize them if you played Mutant Chronicles or Warzone or have any knowledge of the game. The one that was most fleshed out, I noticed when I was looking through the books, was Bauhaus. Bauhaus is a conglomerate of Western European countries, mostly German countries. They have, like, New Berlin is their capital. It's on Luna City. Yeah, they have a Luna City. They also have Venusian Rangers, which is, all of these things are in Mutant Chronicles. Capital, it actually says blatantly, this is the former US. Well, actually, it says that the US government came into great debt to the Capital Corporation and then was kind of like, became Capital, and they moved out into the solar system. Imperial is still the Commonwealth. It says so openly. Mostly it's a conglomerate again of several smaller individual freelance companies that have been purchased by owning 51% of the shares of the Imperial Corporation. Mishima is around. It's still blatantly Asian, but they have like an exile emperor, and they have some kind of like British Parliament style with a House of Lords and a House of Commons. It even says so in the settings book. And there's Cybertronic, which is the most technologically advanced. And also here, they don't know who is the boss. Is this maybe an AI taking care of everything? Everything is done by computer screens. They have androids, they have cyborgs, they have robots and artificial intelligence, all of that stuff. Also, they have the Cartel, and the Cartel was founded almost 40 years prior. It's also, they say straight out that this is basically the UN, but in space, and they have their own peacekeeping force called the Doom Troopers to fight the evil. It's the same as in Mutant Chronicles, or if anyone has played Siege of the Citadel. It's the best soldiers of the corporations fighting, and they have the best equipment, but they are still rivals, and so forth. And there's also the Brotherhood. The Brotherhood is a bit different here. The Brotherhood is divided into 2 groups. It's the Inquisition and the Mission. They were formed, and they weren't too clear on this. I wasn't reading too carefully either, but they are basically crusaders. They are run by a grandmaster and his like 10 chosen other people, and they fight the legions of evil. By the Inquisition does it physically, by getting out spies and evil and fighting them on the battlefield and all that stuff, while the mission tries to convert people by the word, and there's a schism between these two groups. Excuse me, I just ate and I need a drink. Now, what they call the Dark Legion in Mutant Chronicles is just called the Evil here, with a capital E. It's supposed to be this great evil army that existed in the outsides of the solar system, out beyond the Kuiper Belt, and it stops technology from being able to see properly from Pluto and outwards. And this is kind of correlates with the times when this game was developed, because back then Pluto was just a pixelated thing. It's a bit better today, but not much better, honestly. We can see a bit better now. But people didn't know this. So Capital Mishima, they colonized Pluto, and they colonized Nero, and weird shit started to happen. It was like necromorph style from Dead Space. People went insane, and there were mutations and diseases, and people killed each other and themselves, and blah, stuff like that. And suddenly the darkness or the evil started to invade the solar system and is steadily pushing humanity back into the inner solar system. It doesn't really say if any corporation has any dominance on a specific planet. Venus is a jungle planet filled with just war. The only place that there seems to be some kind of like centralized government is on Luna, and that's it. There's also a difference here. Let's see now. Yeah, with the Pluto and the things like that. I'm checking my notes. They even affected cyberspace somehow. And the evil uses like necrotechnology, the necrotech and magic and other weird shit. They create cults amongst humans and stuff like that. There was even mentions about like cults of weird pleasures and maniacs, basically, that it says specifically were into necrophilia and pedophilia. That's kind of bold doing this. And what's happened here is that some might know of the game is called Cult. It's a predecessor to this, and it had a lot of religious themes, a lot of, I think it was kind of based on shock, and a little bit of Call of Cthulhu brought into it, like angels and demons and so forth. So it was a lot of religious iconography used and themes, which they brought into this game setting too. That is so well done, but it was there. And the evil is controlled by some kind of hive mind, source soul, the Dark Soul. And I would say that this setting is basically the Dark Soul era, like the earliest Dark Soul era from Mutant Chronicles, the 3rd edition, more or less. Because the darkness... well, it's hard to compare, but there are a lot of similarities here, and there's a lot of high technology, which is never explored in Mutant Chronicles, or even the 3rd edition, even though it's the best edition so far. Out of the darkness came 7 generals. In the Mutant Chronicles, it's 5. So they removed 2 of them because they were kind of not needed. The most powerful one is Ilian. Again, she is the most powerful in the Mutant Chronicles setting too, and she is still here also the mistress of the void. Here they say more like destruction, but when I read it, it can be interpreted as the void. Demnogonis is here too, but it's actually, they had, in the original setting, it was like 1 female and 4 males. So Ilian is here female. Demnogonis, the Lord of Pestilence became the Mistress of Pestilence. Malvige is here, same stuff, Dreams and Madness. But there's Algoroth, the Dark Lord of Technology and War. Semi, which is the Lord of Lies and Gluttony, basically. But there's two more, which is Chidriel, which is, when I read about it, it's basically Slaanesh. More or less, when I read the description of that apostle. And there's Modus, which is the Lord of Worms and Rot. So, I mean, Slaanesh was kind of conjoined with Semi and a little bit of Malvige, and Modus became more like, well, the Demnogonis had Pestilence, so why not Rot? Rot, Pestilence, and Death. Well, so they kind of streamlined it a little bit. They also have, like, Undead Legionnaires, they have the Necromutants, and the Resides, and the Nephrites. All the stuff is here that we love from the Mutant Chronicles universe, or at least I love it, because it's one of my favorite games. So that's the setting. There's also a lot of descriptions about the different planets and weaponry, a lot of fan-wanking about weaponry as usual. There's like even power armor is available. It's a high-tech society. And evil hasn't started to corrupt technology yet, even though there are hints towards it and the magic and stuff like that. So it sounds kind of cool, but it's still like way out there. So I feel that Chronicles has actually like streamlined the storyline a little bit better than this one. So I don't know why they made this setting at all. And there was one adventure module, as I mentioned. The operation is called Operation Kirkwood. And it says on the front, probably on the picture I'm going to show you guys too, it actually says here, it even has the Mutant Chronicles logo on it. But on the inside, on the in the introduction, I think it says here, yeah, it says here, this is the first adventure to Mutant SPACE. Since this is the first adventure to a new game system, we have decided to do things differently. That's what it says. But above it is still the freaking logotype for Mutant Chronicles. So, Operation Kirkwood is kind of in Mutant Chronicles, kind of in Mutant RYMD. I've noticed now that Modiphius is doing a living campaign that kind of reminds me a little bit of this. A bit, not entirely. So the story of this adventure is actually quite interesting first adventure module to have to this, because it's a bit unusual compared to the others. It demands two groups, two adventuring groups, one that does, because the Kirkwood bunker doesn't I didn't read too thoroughly, doesn't really say where it is, but it's Imperial controlled. It has started to show that massive losses. Nobody knows why, but they want the party to find out what's happening. So they want people who infiltrate the administration, and another interesting part, which is that this is also a penal colony. There are mines that are they use prisoners to mine whatever mineral they have there. So they need people to be in the mine and in the administration building to find out if there's any corruption or influence by the evil, which there is, of course. And they will find out through different clues around the different areas and find out that there's a cult here trying to corrupt everything. I can't remember for what purpose, but evil's gotta be evil, right? And everything is led by a Nephrite, which is one hell of an enemy to throw in for the first adventure module. That's basically throwing not a Tarrasque, but at least a very powerful Lich into the mix at the start when you have your level 1 characters, more or less. So that's it. That's the entire setting. As I said, it goes off into Mutant Chronicles, and after this, Mutant actually stopped. There wasn't any more Mutant being produced after this until the 2000s, when the corporation, the Iron Ring, hired or temporarily bought the license and created a reboot of the original game. And I'm going to talk about that in the next episode. So next episode we're going to talk about Mutant Undergångens arvtagare, or Mutant the Heirs of Doom. But until then, guys, thank you so much for watching, and if you liked what you saw, do leave a like and a comment. But for now, I'm going to sign off, and I'll see you guys later.